What's good, iddies? Week 8 dropped a few days ago, and this one is called Sweet Vitriol, an episode focused on the former floor manager of the severed floor. Say that 3 times fast. Harmony Cobell. This episode is so focused on Cobell that she's literally the only known character that we see. Much like the previous episodes of this season, this one answers some major questions about this character's past, and it drops a major reveal that almost nobody saw coming. Now, before we begin, big shout out to the entire Tinfoil Gang, especially the channel patrons that you see here. These fine people are the executive producers of this show, and I couldn't do this without them. Also, big ups to the newest recruits, Yuri Ono, Andrea and Matt, Bogus Azrael, Julie Rowe, Annie Duke, and Sarah Jenks. I just want to say thank you for choosing to support the channel this way. Your generosity is appreciated, and I hope this puts a smile on your face. But I want to say to everyone, the growth of this channel has been tremendous lately. Thank you, each and every one of you. Alright gang, you know what comes next. It's time to dive. So the last time we saw Harmony Cobell was when she returned to the HQ to find Helena on her way out, and she wanted to see about getting her old job back. Helena offered her, I'm going to say Helena or Helena, sometimes it's a habit thing. Just be aware. Now, Helena offered her the opportunity to make her argument to the board, but for some unknown reason, Cobell's gut instincts told her to turn tail and run. She clearly felt that this ride wasn't going to be good for her, so she took off. Now, catching up with her again, we find her driving on a narrow road to what looks like a small port town, forgotten by the rest of the world. Now, based on the subtle weaving of the Kier theme into the musical score, it's apparent that this place connects Harmony to Lumen in some way. We have yet to find out. This place is called Salt Neck, a location that was hinted to us in that previous episode we talked about earlier. Now, Harmony's turned up in this town with a purpose in mind, so she stops into this depressing little coffee shop. When she enters the coffee shop, it plays out like a cowboy entering a saloon in a country western. It's that dramatic. Now, Harmony is here looking for a person named Sissy, and this character named Hampton is her ticket to getting what she wants. This is Hampton, and it looks like he's seen a ghost, so clearly he knows Harmony. Right away, we learn that he's not just a local proprietor of fine coffee, but he also sells some off-menu items. Now, there are some definite hints that these two have a sordid history that amounts to more than just a working relationship. Harmony asks him to meet up somewhere safe, and when he shows up, she insists that he help her get to this sissy person's spot to retrieve something very important to her. Now, quick side note, notice the shot of the factory with the faded out signage pointing to Lumen. They produced ether here. Keep that in mind for later. This carcass of a building was home to a Lumen factory, essentially making Salt Neck a former company town. We can assume that Harmony probably got her start with Lumen here. Next, we learn that Cobellvig needs to get into Sissy's house, but it's gotta be incognito because she assumes Lumen is watching the house. That's already crazy. A key thing to note is that when Cobell tries to make her case as to why Hampton should help her, she says that they used to be chums or friends, and then she uses the term colleagues. Now, Hampton scoffs at the word and corrects the record by calling it child labor. So we're getting another clue here about Harmony's shared past with Hampton. They both worked for Lumen from a very, very young age. This tidbit should crinkle your tinfoil because it might make you think about Miss Huang. Is this more of Lumen's child labor? Is this something that they still do? Some fans seem to think so. As a matter of fact, it seems that Lumen might still be running a program for gifted students, putting them on track to do big things within the organization. Cobell might have been a product of this herself. There's another possible clue that supports the idea, but we'll get into that later. Now, one thing we can say for sure, Hampton has some resentful feelings towards Cobell for something that happened in the past, and perhaps it's some perceived betrayal. At least that's what it feels like. That said, it's obvious that Hampton still has a soft spot for her too. So Harmony hops in the back of Hampton's pickup truck and they head over to Sissy's house. Now, when we finally meet Sissy, we learn right away that there's a lot of animosity between these two, with Sissy being as difficult as possible, denying Harmony the key she wants to search her mother's old room. It turns out that this house is where Harmony's mother passed away while under Lumen's care, and Sissy is the only person still living there. Note that Sissy is dressed in that old-timey nightgown like the one we saw Harmony wear back in season 1, indicating that she is a full-fledged Lumenite and has been for some time, just like Cobell. Now, Sissy takes an authoritative tone with Harmony throughout the conversation, referring to her as Little Mouse with an unmistakable sarcasm. And this is probably echoing the same disposition Harmony knew from her as a child, strict, condescending, and obstinate AF. But from the conversation, we do learn that Harmony's mother, Charlotte Cobell, was on life support for some time before being taken off of it. This happened while Harmony was at the boarding school for girls run by Myrtle Egan, an era of her life that seems to have started around the age of 12. This lends credence to Ragabi's line about Lumen raising her, likely because her mother was incapable of doing so. Now we have to question what happened to her mother. Currently, the general theory is that Cobell's mother, Charlotte, worked in the factory, somehow got sick as a result of it, and this is why she was on life support. Sissy also mentions that Mr. Egan saw Keir in Harmony when she was a student with them, giving the impression that Harmony drew the attention of the leader of their little work cult early on in her life. So we're slowly building a picture of what happened, and we get to see how we got present-day Harmony Cobell. This conversation is full of clues, but one other thing that she mentions is the Wintertide Fellowship, something we've heard before, and it sounds like some special group of gifted or standout Luminites who get to serve an apprenticeship of some kind. This is the other reference to Miss Huang that I was talking about. We can reference back to the meeting between Milkshake and her in episode 6, I believe it was, where he uses that term. And it seems like he was holding this opportunity over her because it's something any aspiring Lumen employee would want to get accepted into. Anyway, back to the story. So Harmony manages to find the keys to her mother's old room that were hidden in Sissy's room. At least I think this is Sissy's room. But once she gets the keys, she's finally able to enter her mother's old room. This is a place she hasn't seen in a very long time, and she's immediately overwhelmed by grief. So much so that she attaches the breathing tube that she's been carrying around with her to the machine next to the bed, and then she lies in the bed long enough to worry Hampton, who comes into the house to check on her well after sundown. Now we get a moment between these characters where Cobell lets her guard down a bit as they reminisce about the past, and a few hints are dropped in this conversation too. One is that Charlotte Cobell hated Lumen more than Hampton. At least she did near the end of her life, and this is very interesting to hear. So something changed, and we might assume that Lumen crossed her in some way for that to happen. Now, one thing I couldn't figure out is why Sissy never came up the stairs herself. I thought maybe she doesn't go upstairs because she's up in age and it might be difficult, but I'm not so sure anymore. There's something weird and funky about that detail though, or maybe it's just my tinfoil's too tight, who knows. So as the scene continues, Hampton offers Cobelvig some of that huffing stuff, which is most likely ether or something derived from ether. Based on the dialogue, it appears that this stuff was used in the factories, and the workers were most likely getting lit for funsies, but there's also the possibility that Lumen encouraged the use of this stuff on their workforce. We get possible evidence of this when Harmony says, "I haven't had this since I was 8, before taking a hit." Now, if Lumen is down with child labor, it's not too crazy to imagine Harmony working in a factory and being exposed to this stuff. Few interesting facts about ether is that it's an anesthetic that often causes euphoria and memory loss, especially over long-term use, so it's almost like being severed when you think about it. So anyway, Harmony's like, it's shameful that he's selling this stuff right before things kind of get romantic, confirming that these two do indeed have a complicated history, but somewhere along the line, Hampton fell away from Lumen. Now, this is around the time Harmony gets the idea to look into the root cellar for her mysterious treasure, and wouldn't you know it, she finds it. But let's talk about the yearbook she finds before that. When she cracks that book open, the Keir theme song gently starts up again, and we're shown a picture of a young Harmony receiving a special honor. And standing right beside her, none other than James Egan. Now, for me personally, this shot immediately made me think of the theory that James Egan is Harmony's father. It might be the case that Harmony was a love child who is not officially recognized as a member of the clan, and this could be part of why her mother, Charlotte, hated Lumen. Another option is that Harmony had a relationship with James that was inappropriate. It is a possibility. Okay, so let's put that aside and let's talk about this bust that she found with a hidden compartment containing some special paperwork. So what's the deal with the paperwork? Well, we do find out when she heads back into the house before leaving. Sissy still has some venom for her, and this time she's telling Harmony that she should show some humility and respect for Lumen because she owes everything to them. Again, reminding us that Lumen and the Egans have always been a part of Cobell's life. Her entire identity has been completely consumed by this company, or this cult. Harmony then reveals what the papers were, and it's a doozy. It turns out that the severance procedure is at least in part the creation of Harmony Cobell. That's right, Kobelvig is the visionary responsible for the idea, and as such, she probably has some legal rights to it in that regard. Now it makes sense for Lumen to be nervous about Harmony's movements now that she's left the company, as well as why they've been so accommodating in trying to get her back into the fold. She's a threat to the entire project should she become an adversary to the company. And I wouldn't put it past Lumen to do the most when it comes to keeping their secrets. Car accidents seem to be all too common in these parts. Now you have to wonder though, if she created Severance, if she came up with the idea, then why does she hate severed people so much? Could it be that she disapproves of how Severance is being used? Perhaps it played out like it often does when it comes to important inventions and their inventors. She had a completely different use case in mind, but Lumen took the idea and ran with it, derailing it for a more lucrative angle. We also know that her mother, Charlotte, was invalid, bedridden, and unable to really raise her. Could the Severance procedure have been Harmony's answer to that problem? Maybe she was motivated to create Severance to help her mother cope with her condition. It's also possible that Harmony was okay with what Lumen did with Severance. It may just be that she doesn't feel like she's getting the recognition she deserves for that, and that's what she's upset about and why she sticks around despite being treated so poorly. Anyway, when Sissy sees the homework, she's legitimately impressed, but when she asks why she's only finding out about this now, Harmony tells her that the Egans told her to zip it, essentially taking the idea from her and probably giving her a position in the company as consolation for stealing her ideas. If she were to try and claim anything, she'd be banished, according to her. And I think we both know that banished is just the start of it. It's probably worse than banishment. Now Sissy, upon hearing this, thinks it's a good idea to add a little more kindling to the fire. Despite what she's just learned, she's still a Lumen soldier, and she throws a little gas on the fire by telling Harmony that her mother pulled her own life support tubing out, and that she believes Charlotte died a miserable non-believer who was undeserving, and that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Sissy sounds like she's great at parties. After all of those deep cuts, Hampton warns us that Lumen has someone inbound, so Harmony's gotta make tracks, like right now. Before she leaves, she thanks Hampton for coming through for her. Now another interesting thing happens when we see her getting a call from Devon, so Devon ignored Ragabi's warning and called her anyway. That said, the ending scene gives us the impression that Kobelvig is ready to flip on Lumen, or at the very least, she might be willing to give Mark a hand. Some people say this was a slow episode. I completely disagree. There was a lot going on here, just maybe not in terms of physical action. Either way, this episode erases a lot of Kobel theories and changed the way I see this character fundamentally. Turns out all of the perceived devotion to Lumen was really about her devotion to her own creation. Severance is her baby, and she wants to see it through. Anyway, that's a wrap on this one. I really could keep going, but let's save some of this for later. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, you already know what to do. Shout out to the Tinfoil fam and the patrons, of course. Be safe out there, and until next week, off you go.